notice of motion, RMS Princess Highway, Jervis Bay Road. Councillor Aldrich, you have the floor.
Yes, so I sent a part 2 to this motion today and a picture to put up on the wall on the screen after consultation with the Vincentia Matters group. So the motion as written in the paper is incorrect, and I did previously send through a replacement which was emailed to everybody, so the one on the screen is the correct motion. The members of the Vincentia Matters group contacted me a couple of weeks ago after hearing the member for South Coast on the radio saying that possibly a flyover would not be the preferred option for that, or a grade separated intersection would not be the preferred option for that intersection, and were quite distressed about it. In December 2018, Councillor Wells moved a motion that that Council wanted a grade separated intersection there, and at the time we voted for option 2 out of 3 options that were presented. The option that the Vincentia's Matter group at the time agreed with that because it was the cheapest option, and they just wanted it done and thought if they chose a cheaper option it would be done quickly. However, this time later nothing's been done and it's still under consideration. So they've contacted me now and said that this option on the screen is the option that they would prefer. And it certainly is a far better option because it includes a right-hand turn coming north on the Princess Highway, which a couple of us actually voted or wanted on that in the December 2018 meeting, but the other option was voted for at the time. So I'd just like councillors to consider this option, which the community out there really want. The reason that they believe that a grade separated intersection should go there is really for 2 points: safety and traffic congestion. It's one of the busiest intersections between Nowra and the Victorian border. There's 24,000 traffic movements a day on the highway and 11,500 traffic movements a day on Jervis Bay Road itself. The population of the Bay Basin is over 24,000 people, and it's estimated to increase by 11% by 2030. Gerringong has 2 grade separated intersections entering and leaving the town, which has a far smaller population than the Jervis Bay region, and they're also now building a grade separated intersection at the Strongs Road intersection with the new Bombarderi to Berry Road. So they feel that that they really deserve that for safety and congestion reasons. A couple of weeks ago, I sat at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, not in school holidays. I sat in Jervis Bay Road and waited. I timed it 18 minutes to make a right-hand turn, and that's just on a normal weekday. So, and then I met with some people from Vincentia Matters out there a couple of weeks ago at 10 o'clock in the morning on a weekday, and the traffic queued up on Jervis Bay Road was as far as you could see. And we were there for about an hour, and it just increased the whole time we were there. It's really something that needs to be done. It needs to be done urgently. So I would really like council to just let the relevant members of Parliament know that that's what we would prefer for the people of Jervis Bay.
Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Proudfoot.
I foreshadow a different motion, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor De Giglio foreshadowed the notice of motion. Councillor Proudfoot is now foreshadowing another motion.
I can't. Do you want me to speak on this motion or the original? I can't support the original motion, and my foreshadowed motion is quite different. It's a different approach, and I would argue that it's a a more embracing approach. I believe that this motion is somewhat underdone, and that the idea of bringing a motion to the council is to give the idea of a grade separated intersection the best possible chance of success, the best possible chance of prosecuting our case with not just some of the elected politicians, but all of the relevant elected politicians, the Premier of New South Wales and the Leader of the Opposition. So that's what the foreshadowed motion, which I can put on the screen there, and I believe that there are some councillors here that would like to even add greater thrust to that, and that's what we're on about, making sure that that we give not just the Vincentia Matters people, there's also other groups in that community, and it's not just simply the Vincentia community, it's the entire basin area, and so that we need to be mindful of taking different organisations, different groups with us. And so that's also will be included in the foreshadowed motion. And at this stage, we've had no commitment from the government or the opposition at all to a grade separated intersection. In fact, some of the noise coming out of the Transport New South Wales is that they're not very keen, and they're the advisory body to the government and to any potential government. And so we need to take up the fight on this one far more assertively, in my view. And so that's why I brought the foreshadowed motion forward. And should this get voted down, I will talk more about the foreshadowed motion. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
And there's a part 6, I know it's been added, the letter of 7 and 8.
I'd like to make those amendments.
So do I have a seconder for the foreshadowed motion? Councillor Pakes. Councillor White, you're moving amendments to the foreshadowed motion. We need to deal with the first motion first. Councillor Aldrich's notice of motion.
Can I just speak a minute? Can I just say that I'm happy to remove my motion and make
Thank
that
you,
now the
Councillor.
motion.
Thank you, Councillor Aldrich. Councillor
The only thing is, I would like it noted that this particular option is the option that's preferred by the community out there, and that Vincentia Matters now has members from all over the Bay and Basin area. It's just, and they've all been working together. It's not just people from Vincentia.
Councillor Proudfoot, do you have any objection to a part 9 going in that council notes the preferred option referred to it for consideration by VRRA? Vincentia Matters, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Pardon?
That's fine.
That's fine, okay. No, it's Vincentia Matters. Yeah. Okay, well, Councillor Aldrich, thank you for withdrawing that. Is there any discussion on the foreshadowed motion?
Mr. Chair, just clarification on process. If Councillor Aldrich's withdrawn that motion now,
Yes.
the motion is no longer on the table.
No.
How can the foreshadowed motion be debated? Unless,
It's
but it's been so the original motion's been withdrawn, so it's no longer on the paper.
So the foreshadowed motion becomes the substantive motion.
Does that work? Okay, you can do that. Wonderful. Can I speak?
Okay. Yes, you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to support the foreshadowed motion, and can I say on record, and I think every councillor in the room will agree, that this intersection in that location is probably one of the worst intersections in our city currently. It is a hot spot for accidents. It is one of the most frequented intersections in the city, and all the measures to date to try and make that intersection better, I've been told by some residents, have actually made it worse. And for example, the slowing of the traffic. So what actually happens now is, as the traffic slows, it allows all the traffic to bank up. It is actually creating less gaps for people to get out. I am glad that we've put a little bit more information into this motion, because I will be honest, I was concerned that this issue had just been turned into a political game, and some people were using the good people of Vincentia to try and kick. to try and kick a few political goals. Firstly, you would think that if the leader of the opposition party is going to come down and attack a sitting member, they'd first be briefed on which electorate they were actually in, which electorate was represented where the intersection was, and perhaps maybe even just do a little bit more research and find out who the member is who represents that area. And they can't deny it because that Member of Parliament openly said on a TV interview 3 or 4 times that she was down here in Shelley Hancock's electorate representing the people. That's not correct. It's the seat of Kiama, and Gareth Ward is the member.
That's correct.
So that's very disappointing that you know the leader or the deputy leader of the opposition would appear couldn't even be bothered to be briefed on which location it was in, and then to attack the member whose electorate it wasn't even for something she said on the radio. And the minister clearly stated that she wasn't a traffic expert, and she wanted to wait till the RMS had delivered the outcome of their investigation. Where people forget to mention that after that statement she also did say that I understand that this is the community's preferred option, and once the RMS have delivered their verdict, I will go into bat and I will be at the front of the queue to ensure our community gets what they deserve and what they need. And I'm sure the members have watched council and watched the community, and they understand that our community is not going to settle for anything less than a flyover or something of that nature that is going to relieve all that pressure on that intersection. So I am glad we're writing to all members of Parliament and members of the opposition, because there has been no commitment at all from the opposition, and we're not that far out from another election. We're only 2 or 3 years out from an election. So I would like to see what all levels of government, whether in government or not, are going to do to support our residents here in Jervis Bay, and especially the turn-off here. So thanks to Councillor Proudfoot for moving the motion, and I want to acknowledge Councillor Aldrich, who has brought it to the attention of Council again. And she also did mention, Mr Chair, that it was your motion back 12 months ago that really brought this to the attention of Council, and I thank you also for bringing that motion forward.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor De Giglio?
Yeah, I would just like to hear what Councillor White wanted to make amendments, and maybe we can go from there, and then I'll speak if that's okay.
Are you happy for?
I'm happy for you to speak, Councillor White, always.
Yep. So I believe that the motion that's now been put up by Councillor Proudfoot is a much stronger notice, because we are talking about all political parties. We're not just talking about the sitting members or the sitting transport minister. They change all the time. I think it's really important that we get a letter of support from seats in relation to the grade separation. I can let you know that Batemans Bay Eurobodella Council is putting, and I'm not saying we're having a roundabout, but is putting a massive roundabout down at Batemans Bay just as you head out of Batemans Bay. And they were successful in working with seats to get $40 million out of the state government to actually put the roundabout in. It's going on their bypass road. So I think it's important that we have the advocacy of all of the councils from Wollongong to Latrobe and inland to say we want to see this happen on this intersection. In relation to the petition, I have a copy of the petition. It was sent to me by Vincentia Matters. They've got to get 10,000 signatures on that petition before a report will go before the state parliament. It's all right if they get a few thousand, but then it just gets put away in the drawer because that's it. Once it hits 10,000, it's got to go to the floor of the chamber in New South Wales Parliament. It's very hard for them to get those 10,000 signatures, I know, because I've had to do it myself. So I want the council's support to put those petitions in the council admin building, in the council libraries, in Holiday Haven, where we have a lot of tourists coming and going, just on the counters, and if people wish to sign them, they can sign them. I would also ask that the members of Parliament that we have, the 3 members of Parliament, that they put them in their office as well, because they have people in there all the time to sign petitions. I think we need to have a joint effort by everybody to get this across the line. And the last one, I want you to write to the VRRA advising them what we have done in this recommendation and seeking their support for the petitioners also, because I think it's important that the whole community out there is involved in what is happening, because it's their life that affects them. So I'll just speak to it then as well. So I look at the roadworks from Gerringong to Bomaderry, and I see there's lots of grade separations and bridges that just go into rural lanes, like Tyndall's Lane. They just go off into rural settlements, and that aren't as important as this intersection. The other thing that we're all aware of is that we are going to have a duplication of the highway. It's been funded to Sussex Inlet, and then it's going to go beyond Sussex Inlet right down to the bottom of the Shoalhaven and then into the Eurobodalla. Planning is underway for all of that, and I would think that we need to set the benchmark. We need to say, this is what we're going to accept as a council for our community and our residents. I know the long and involved fights that happened in the northern Shoalhaven when the road from Gerringong to Bomaderry was being built, and the arguments that were had by the communities and by the RMS at the time and by the council, etc., to get those bridges in where they needed to go. So I think we need to set the benchmark at JB Road. We need to set it there and say, and as you move further down that highway, when we get to places that we need another bridge out, so let's talk about the Wool Road further down. I know we're getting a roundabout at Island Point Road. That disturbs me a bit, that's been allowed to slip through too. But I think we need to set the benchmark now. We need to advocate to all levels of government that you need to fund this, you need to do it right. Don't put a roundabout there and come back in 2 years or 3 years and say it didn't work, we now got to put grade separation there. We need it from day one. I'm happy to support the picture from Vincentia Matters as to how they would like to see it done. I understand that if we want to have grade separation there, overpasses, underpasses, whatever it ends up being, we will lose some vegetation on the side of the road, because that will have to be taken out to be able to put that in. So I just think it's important that we advocate it. I do believe that it's been a bit too long for us to be waiting for this to happen. The safety issues don't work. I can't tell you how many times I've almost had an accident sitting down that highway, and all of a sudden the cars stop because somebody stops to let somebody out, or we've got the 80 Ks and they're doing 100 and then suddenly realise they need to do 80. So it is still dangerous. I hate it myself when I have to come out of JB Road. I think every time I do it, I'm taking my life in my own hands to come out. So I think it's important that we get on and get the job done, and we let Transport New South Wales and all political parties know that we want this done sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Councillor De Julio, do you wish to speak now?
Thank you. I just want to add to what Councillor White said, and Councillor Aldrich, thank you for bringing it to the table and everyone's contribution. It's nice to have a full-on collaborative approach and something we can all be in alignment with. I think doing it once and doing it properly is the prudent thing to do in this case. I know someone who actually had an accident in that area, and in honour of them, I think it's, for me personally, it's a really important project that we support. We do want to reduce accidents. Our emergency department don't really cope too well with accidents. We still need to fly them out of the area in serious accidents. I want to thank Liz Tooley, who's a bull terrier on this case. She's been at it for quite a while, and I really acknowledge her. Had a coffee last week, and this is something she's really passionate about. The community, their safety, their well-being is on this, as well as our holiday makers who were fully behind this petition. I think we're going to get our 10,000 signatures on this. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge the input from Councillor Proudfoot and Councillor Aldrich tonight. And yeah, let's get it out there and show them that our council is quite functional.
Councillor Guile, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do wish to commend the wisdom of Councillor Proudfoot's motion in this, and just make raise in saying that, you know, if Gerringong to Berry could get so many grade separated overpasses, why can't we have one at JB Road? That almost forgets the history of that project, because even though it was promised and coming into government by Barry O'Farrell and then candidate Gareth Ward, who's now the member, as soon as they got to government and Nick Greiner, as Chair of Infrastructure New South Wales, reviewed the whole project, the recommendation on Gerringong to Berry was that the scope and cost of the project be reviewed. And it was a political fight to maintain the funding to produce that road at the standard that it's being delivered at. It was not an easy thing, because the science of traffic management, and that's what it is a science, tends to rule the bureaucratic classes in New South Wales, as it does across most of the country. So it's only by all of the political class coming together in some unity that we can deliver a result, if you like, that will actually prevail against what the traffic engineers will be recommending. They'll go through their processes of roundabouts, of traffic lights, and they will have all of the scientific reasons as to why it should be that way. But if there is a unified front from council and from all of the elected members, and from other levels of government and from agencies like SEATS, advocacy lobby groups like that, then we do have a chance of delivering what the community would like to see happen there.
Before I give you a right of reply, Councillor Proudfoot, I'd just like to make a few comments myself. Last week I had reason to drive to Ballina and back in 5 days. Between Woolgoolga and Ballina, there is a massive road project costing $4.9 billion for a 155 kilometre 4-lane upgrade crossing both the Clarence and Richmond rivers. The structures that cross those rivers have to be seen to be believed. They make our third bridge look like a coat hanger. The bridge over the Clarence is staggering in its dimensions. It averages out on that section of road 31.6 million per kilometre on the north coast. So I will not accept, and I don't resile from, pursuing the best option for our community, whatever the cost. Over to you, Councillor Proudfoot.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. No, this is not my right of reply. No.
So, but a few of us have.
But my light was on.
My light's on, for a reason.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. With the concurrence of my seconder, I'd just like to add to, I think it's point 6, we need to include the Basin Villages Forum. Is Council right with the VRRA?
Yeah.
And point 8, and the Basin Villages Forum, as well as all known community organisations, because you've got several of those. You've got the Chamber of Commerce at Vincentia. You've got you got Huskisson Forum as well. Huskisson Forum. You've got Wallamai, all that. So we need to include all of those things. Now, just speaking to it, Mr. Chairman, we went through something very similar to this in terms of establishing a police station in the Bay and Basin area, and part of that deal is to increase the police presence. And it was a very similar strategy. And I know that when we held the public meeting at the Country Club regarding the grade separated intersection, I spoke at that meeting at the end of the meeting, and I addressed it to the political class, and I said there's an election coming up, and it's a pretty wise idea to come up with a commitment towards that section of the Princes Highway to do something. Now, unfortunately, there was no commitment forthcoming, and I found that a bit sad that either party couldn't commit to something that's so important. Now, let's face it, the Princes Highway from south of Nowra is a killer highway. There's no question about it. And this intersection is so dangerous, and it has all the potential to be the greatest negative part of that killer highway. There are many sections of the Princes Highway that are just unsafe, and this particular section is completely unsafe. And really, our political class need to get on the front foot. They need to do something very, very proactive and promote the case, and never get off the case with Transport New South Wales in terms of their intention. And to stump up the money, there's quite a bit of money going around at the moment with all the sadness of the coronavirus and the havoc that has wreaked, particularly in not just health but in our economy. And so this is where our federal member comes in. And I'm asking her, very respectfully, to go to the federal government and just see what you can come up with. Because now is the time to go, as they say, cap in hand and do something. There's no question about it. We can't let this moment pass. And I thank Councillor Wells initially for his very detailed background to this motion. I've included that as a background to this motion. So this motion stands beside the original motion. It doesn't circumvent it. It stands beside it. It just adds to it, and it adds to the impetus that we want to give this project. And I believe that we can get it over the line if we keep pushing, take our community with us and keep pushing. Also, there's a few other things that I intend to do at a future meeting with a future notice of motion that will again add to the impetus. And you can't let it go. It's about collective activism in a very, very responsible manner. This is not about being radical. This is about doing it responsibly but taking action. And I hope everyone supports the thrust of this. And we get together as a council and we get together as a community and we get together as a state government opposition and make this happen. It's just so crucial.
Councillor Gash, your light's come on.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I'll just be very quick. It was remiss of me not to ask you to include RDA, Regional Development Australia, of which I'm a member, and it's a government body. And Councillor Proudfoot, can you also add somewhere, if we're writing to all these people, and if they don't respond, can we call them out? Yeah, well, I'm just saying we should perhaps put that in there. We get their responses and find out who do and who doesn't agree with this, and let people know. Then that make their own minds up.
Well, I think we can put something around that idea that we indicate to our community those people that respond to our request.
That's a good idea.
And what their response
What the
is.
response are, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's one thing I think in all these issues that we've all forgotten about, and that's been the Traffic New South Wales attitude to other intersections where there were private projects proposed. Take the Shoalhaven Temple project, for example. Something that wasn't going to generate 5% of the traffic that's on Jervis Bay Road.
But they wanted a great intersection.
They were insisting that it would be a grade intersection. And they said in their submissions to us that they weren't ever going to have another intersection on the highway which wasn't a grade separated intersection. And yet here they are planning on putting in traffic lights.
Or roundabout.
Forget the roundabout. So I think it's not good enough for Traffic New South Wales, or whatever you call them these days, they keep changing their name, to come up with a half-baked solution for government when it wasn't good enough for a modest private enterprise development. And that should be noted, it should be hammered home to them, and we should throw the words back in their face. We won't accept anything but a grade separated intersection on the Princes Highway in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Do you have anything to add, Councillor?
I do, yeah. I just wanted to say that I'm glad that the councillors have all come on board with this, because the member for South Coast actually said that I should keep my nose out of it and concentrate on council-only issues. So I'm glad that this council is stepping up and is going to actually stand up for the people of the South Coast and this area of the Shoalhaven, who we are here to represent. Thank you.
Councillor Proudfoot, do you want right of reply there?
Mr Chairman, to add further evidence, the latest figures are that the Shoalhaven, this is before the coronavirus impacted, has the greatest tourist visitation numbers anywhere outside Sydney. This is in New South Wales. So it's not only a very substantial local population through the Bay and Basin area, we're talking about a very substantial visitor population. The Shoalhaven, as we know, increases on a regular year by about 300% around the Christmas period. One would assume that when you extrapolate those figures through the Bay and Basin area, we're talking 400 or 500%, because the Bay and Basin area is without a doubt the number one tourist visitation area in the Shoalhaven. So on those figures alone, plus the proposed increases in population, where weekenders are now filling up with permanent residences, there are some land releases in that area. It's quite a growth area. So you're looking at local population swell, you're looking at tourist visitation numbers. It's too big an issue to let pass just on that alone. But when we look at the killer highway, the Princes Highway, it's a no-brainer. It just has to happen, Mr Chairman.
Thank you. Minute Secretary, before I put the item, could you roll through to point 8, please, on the recommendation? Point 8, could you delete the word recommendation and put in resolution?
Yep.
Thank you. With that minor amendment, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, raise your right hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council.